On the night of November 14th, 1940, over 500 German bombers, led by the specialists of Kampfgruppe 100, descended upon the city of Coventry. On the ground, British jammers, operating at a compromised strength, fought back against the invisible guiding beams of the ecret system. They managed to interfere with some of them, successfully confusing a number of bombers and sending them off course. But many, far too many, got through. The city burned. The medieval cathedral, a landmark for centuries, was destroyed, its spire a hollowed-out torch against the red sky. Hundreds of acres of the city center were leveled. Hundreds died. Thousands were injured. In his London office, R.V. Jones listened to the reports trickling in throughout the night. Each update: cathedral hit, munitions works ablaze, heavy casualties, felt like a personal failure. Rationally, he knew his work had likely saved many more lives than were lost that night. But that rational, scientific part of his brain was drowned out by the sheer horror of the event. In the aftermath, Jones walked through the ruins of Coventry with a technical team, documenting the bomb patterns. The evidence was clear. The British jamming had worked. There were distinct clusters of bomb craters and fields outside the city, miles from the ecret's intended aiming point. But the human cost was still catastrophic. As they worked, an elderly woman, sorting through the rubble of what had been her home, looked up at Jones and his team with their clipboards and measuring equipment. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice flat. "What are you measuring?" Jones, the 28-year-old physicist who had known this was coming, struggled to find the words. We're from the Air Ministry. We're trying to make sure this doesn't happen again." She looked at him for a long, hard moment, her gaze seeming to strip him bare. Then she nodded once. "Then make sure it bloody well doesn't." That encounter haunted Jones for the rest of his life. It was a brutal reminder that the invisible war of beams and electronics had very visible, very human consequences. Every technical decision had a human cost. Every calculated risk was calculated in lives. But the work had to continue, because as devastating as Coventry was, without Jones's countermeasures, every British city could have suffered the same fate. The attack on Coventry made one thing crystal clear. Jamming alone wasn't enough. It was a partial solution, a bandage on a mortal wound. Jones knew he needed a way to not just interfere with the German beams, but to completely neutralize them. That meant understanding the German transmitters, their antenna systems, better than the Germans themselves. The problem was that the German transmitters used highly directional antennas to focus radio energy into those incredibly narrow, precise beams. British transmitters, by comparison, were like shotguns trying to fight a sniper rifle. They couldn't match that precision. This is where Jones's background in pure physics became crucial. He wasn't just an intelligence analyst. He was a trained scientist. He began designing antenna systems not for broadcasting, but for fighting. "The Germans are using what's called a parasitic array," Jones explained to his technical team, sketching furiously on a blackboard. "They have a main antenna element, with additional elements positioned precisely to focus the radio waves in one direction." He continued, a sharp glint in his eye. "But if we understand their exact configuration, we can build our own antennas that create interference patterns perfectly aligned with their beams." It was easier said than done. Jones needed precise measurements. This meant analyzing crashed aircraft and poring over high-altitude reconnaissance photographs. Robert Watson Watt, the celebrated pioneer of radar, joined Jones's efforts. Together, they began developing a new generation of British directional antennas. The breakthrough came, once again, from a captured German. A downed bomber near Dover had been carrying technical manuals for ground station maintenance. These manuals included antenna diagrams. They weren't complete specifications, but for a mind like Jones's, it was enough. He locked himself in his office for 2 days, working with frantic energy. he emerged, triumphant. "Look at this," he said, pointing to the diagrams. "They're using a specific spacing between elements. It's exactly 3/4 of a wavelength. 3/4 lambda spacing." Watson Watt murmured, "My God. That means we can calculate the exact radiation pattern of their antennas." "Exactly," Jones replied. "And if we know their pattern, we can design counter antennas that create destructive interference right in the center of their beams. We can cancel them out." Over the next few months, a new network of specialized British transmitters was built across the country, each equipped with the new highly directional antennas designed by Jones. These weren't crude jamming stations. They were precision instruments of electronic warfare. The results were remarkable. German bombing accuracy began to decline dramatically. Pilots reported increasing unreliability in their navigation systems, citing beam failure or signal fade. Bombs started falling harmlessly in open countryside or into the sea, anywhere but on their intended targets. And because the British countermeasures were so precise and subtle, German engineers struggled to understand what was going wrong. The Luftwaffe began to suspect British interference, but they couldn't prove it. The signals looked clean on their instruments, yet somehow, the beams just weren't working. This confusion bought Britain precious time. R.V. Jones had turned pure science into a weapon more powerful than any bomb. His antennas were saving thousands of lives, and for a crucial period, the Germans didn't fully understand what was happening. This invisible shield, born from tragedy and genius, helped protect a nation. The War of the Beams was a constant, escalating battle of wits and waves. Just as British countermeasures were mastering the ecret system, the young physicist R.V. Jones discovered that the Germans had, yet again, developed something new, something more advanced. In decoded messages from early 1941, a strange new word began to appear. Watson, the name of a mythological one-eyed god. For Jones, the implication was immediate and chilling. He understood it meant a single beam system, far more sophisticated than anything that had come before. This new system was technically designated ecret, and it was revolutionary. The complex multi-beam approach of ecret was gone, replaced by a deceptively simple single, highly precise beam. Instead of needing separate beams for guidance and range, ecret used just one. It worked through a transponder system. The aircraft would essentially talk back to the ground station. Here's how it worked. The ground beam would send out a signal, an interrogation, to a special transponder on the aircraft. The transponder would immediately send a signal back. By measuring the tiny time delay of this round trip, German ground controllers could calculate the aircraft's exact distance, its range, continuously and in real time. It was, in effect, a primitive form of the distance measuring equipment, or DME, that is standard in all modern aviation today. When you combine this pinpoint range finding with the beam's incredibly accurate guidance, it allowed for extraordinary bombing accuracy. In a private briefing, Jones explained the new threat to Prime Minister Winston Churchill. "It's elegant and terrifying," he said. The Prime Minister, smoking his famous cigar, studied the young physicist intently, a cloud of smoke swirling around his head. "With Knickebein," Jones explained, "we confused them. With ecret, we bent their beams. But Watson, ecret is different. It's a two-way system. It's a conversation." Jones knew that the old tricks wouldn't work this time. If we jam it, if we just shout with our own radio signals, they will know immediately that we're listening. They'll know we've compromised the system, and they'll just change it. We need a different approach. Churchill blew a thick cloud of smoke, his eyes sharp and questioning. "What do you propose, Dr. Jones? What is the counter to this ... conversation?" "Deception," Jones replied, his confidence now absolute. "We don't jam their signals. We don't try to shout them down. Instead, we answer them. Churchill's famous eyebrow raised in surprise and intrigue. "We build our own transponders on the ground," Jones continued. "Our systems will detect their interrogation signal, and then we will respond, impersonating their bomber. We will feed them false information. We will make them think their bomber is somewhere it's not. It's technically complex, but it's our best option." A grim smile spread across Churchill's face. "You're proposing we speak to German bombers in their own language and lie to them. I approve. Make it happen, Dr. Jones." The technical challenge was immense. Jones and his team had to reverse engineer the entire ecret transponder system without ever having seen one. They were working completely in the dark, trying to build a complex piece of enemy technology from scratch. They had to work backward from the faint intercepted signals they could pick up, from complex theoretical calculations, and from small clues they found in other, unrelated pieces of captured German equipment. It was like trying to build a car engine by only listening to it from a mile away. Dr. Robert Cockburn, another brilliant electronic warfare specialist, joined the effort. Together, he and Jones designed a countermeasure they called a masking beacon. This was a ground-based system designed to be the ultimate liar. It could detect the German ecret interrogation signals, instantly analyze their parameters, and then transmit a false response back to the German ground station, perfectly mimicking the signal from the bomber. The beauty of this system, Cockburn explained, is that the Germans won't immediately know something's wrong. Their equipment will seem to work perfectly. To the German radio operator, all the dials and lights would look normal. He'd see a steady signal and get clean data. "The numbers will make sense," Cockburn continued. "But in reality, we'll be controlling the range data. We'll be feeding them coordinates that are miles off target." Testing the system was nerve-wracking. A single mistake could expose the entire operation. The first operational use came on a night when British intelligence indicated a ecret-equipped bomber was heading for a crucial naval base at Portsmouth. As the bomber approached, the British masking beacons activated. The German ground station sent its ping. The British beacon on the ground heard it and sent a pong back, precisely timed to create a false reality. On the German ground controller screen, everything looked perfect. His bomber appeared to be proceeding flawlessly along the glide path. His instruments told him the aircraft was directly over the target. He confidently spoke into his microphone. "Bombing AB, bombs away." The German bomber, completely confident in its position, dropped its entire payload precisely where the system indicated, 5 miles out to sea. The bombs exploded harmlessly in the black, empty ocean. The Portsmouth naval base was completely untouched. In the days and weeks that followed, more and more German attacks were similarly misdirected. German Bomber Command was completely baffled. High-ranking Luftwaffe officers gathered around maps, furious and perplexed. Their most advanced system appeared to work perfectly. The equipment passed every diagnostic test their technicians could think of. Yet bombs kept missing their targets, sometimes by miles. In the absence of any technical explanation, the pilots were often blamed for incompetence or cowardice. The Germans never fully understood what was happening. They never discovered the electronic ghost that was haunting their airwaves. Eventually, they reduced their reliance on ecret, attributing its spectacular failures to vague problems like atmospheric interference and technical unreliability. They simply concluded their wonder weapon was a dud. In reality, R.V. Jones and his team of wizards had successfully turned the most sophisticated German guidance system into a liability, a tool that sowed confusion and frustration. By choosing not to shout, but to whisper lies, they won a critical and unseen victory in the War of the Beams. By mid-1941, Jones had become Britain's secret weapon against the Luftwaffe, but his work remained deeply classified. Most British citizens had no idea that an invisible war was being fought above their heads. or that a young physicist was saving countless lives by manipulating radio waves. The secret, however, nearly came undone in June 1941. A British newspaper, trying to explain the declining accuracy of German bombing raids, published an article suggesting that the RAF had developed sophisticated jamming techniques. The article was vague but contained just enough detail to potentially alert German intelligence. Jones was furious and terrified. If the Germans realized the full extent of British countermeasures, they might develop entirely new systems that would take months to understand and counter. He demanded a meeting with the newspaper editor and the government security services. "You may have just undone 18 months of work," Jones told the editor coldly. "Every word of that article tells German intelligence what to look for. If they piece it together, thousands of people could die." The government issued D-notices, suppressing any further reporting on the subject. German intelligence did notice the article, but without detailed technical information, they couldn't confirm whether it was accurate or simply British propaganda. The secret held. Meanwhile, Jones's team continued to expand. What had started as a handful of scientists had grown into a sophisticated organization. They monitored every radio frequency the Germans might use and developed countermeasures before systems could even become operational. In one remarkable case, Jones's team detected a new German beam system during testing before it was ever used in combat. By the time the Luftwaffe deployed it operationally, British countermeasures were already in place. The system failed so completely on its first use that German commanders assumed it was defective and abandoned it entirely. The invisible war had reached a stalemate. German engineers kept developing new systems, but Jones and his team kept neutralizing them. Churchill, in a private moment with Jones, acknowledged the magnitude of his achievement. "Dr. Jones, you've given us time. Time to survive. The Battle of the Beams was just as crucial, and you won it with mathematics and physics." Jones, characteristically modest, simply replied, "We did what needed to be done, sir. Science in service of survival." While Jones was battling German beam systems, he stumbled upon something else. Something that would prove even more significant to the war effort. In analyzing German radio communications and technical documents, he began noticing references to research at a place called Peenemünde on the Baltic coast. The references were cryptic: advanced weapons, rockets, long-range bombardment. At first, Jones thought it might be related to beam guidance systems, but as more intelligence accumulated, he realized this was something entirely different. In June 1943, a resistance operative in Luxembourg photographed a strange document that had been carelessly left in a hotel room by a German officer. The document made its way to Jones's desk. It contained technical drawings and calculations for a rocket, a massive missile capable of carrying a ton of explosives across hundreds of miles. Jones felt his blood run cold. If the Germans had developed such a weapon, it would revolutionize warfare. Unlike aircraft, rockets couldn't be intercepted by fighters or anti-aircraft guns. They traveled faster than the speed of sound. If launched in sufficient numbers, rocket weapons could devastate British cities with impunity. He immediately briefed Churchill and the military leadership. Many were skeptical. "Rockets?" scoffed one general. "This sounds like something from H.G. Wells... But Jones had learned from the beam battle. When something seemed impossible, that didn't mean it wasn't happening. Jones pushed for reconnaissance missions over Peenemünde. In June 1943, RAF photo reconnaissance aircraft captured images of the facility. Analysis revealed what appeared to be large rocket-like objects on test stands. There were also unusual circular structures that Jones identified as launch platforms. "This is real," Jones told the skeptics. "The Germans have operational rocket weapons. We need to act now." On the night of August 17, 1943, the Royal Air Force launched Operation Hydra. It was a massive, high-risk bombing raid on the secret German facility at Peenemünde. Over 600 heavy bombers, Lancasters, Halifaxes, and Sterlings flew to the remote Baltic coast. Their mission was to destroy the heart of Hitler's advanced weapons program. They dropped nearly 2,000 tons of high explosives on the facility. The raid was costly. 40 British bombers were lost, a heavy price to pay, but it was devastatingly effective. It destroyed workshops, test stands, and critical research labs. It also killed hundreds of personnel, including many of Germany's top rocket scientists and engineers. Most importantly, the raid set back the German rocket program by months. Critical months that would change the course of the war. The V-2 rockets that eventually attacked London in 1944 came later, and in far smaller numbers than Hitler had originally planned. The city survived, battered but not broken. Reginald Jones's intelligence work, which had started with his seemingly crazy antenna theory, had once again saved countless lives. But there was an even bigger secret, one that Jones had unknowingly helped to expose. The same scientists working on rockets at Peenemünde were also conducting nuclear research. Documents recovered after the war revealed that Germany's atomic program had been centered at several sites, with critical coordination happening through facilities just like Peenemünde. The German uranium club was a real and present danger. By helping to disrupt operations at this key location, by killing key personnel and destroying vital infrastructure, Jones had inadvertently interfered with German nuclear weapons development. Had the Peenemünde program continued unimpeded, had the V-2 been deployed months earlier as planned, Hitler might have obtained atomic weapons. The V-2 rockets could have been armed not with conventional explosives, but with nuclear warheads. The consequences would have been catastrophic. A nightmare scenario that could have altered history forever. Jones didn't learn the full, terrifying scope of what he had helped prevent until long after the war. When he finally read the declassified reports, it gave him nightmares. His crazy work on radio beams had led him to discover beam guidance systems, which had led to rocket intelligence, which in turn had disrupted the development of nuclear weapons. It was a domino effect of staggering proportions. One young physicist's curiosity and unshakable persistence had, without exaggeration, potentially saved civilization itself. When the war finally ended in May 1945, Reginald Jones was just 33 years old. He had spent 6 long years fighting an invisible, high-stakes war that few people knew existed, and even fewer understood. His work had saved thousands of lives, prevented countless tons of explosives from reaching their targets, and helped expose Hitler's most dangerous secret weapons programs. He had played a pivotal role in securing victory. In the years immediately after the war, Jones's story remained classified. The revolutionary techniques his team had developed were simply too valuable to reveal publicly. A new conflict was brewing. The Cold War was beginning, and the same electronic warfare methods that had defeated the Luftwaffe might be needed against the Soviet Union. The secrets were locked away, and Jones's contributions remained hidden from public view. But gradually, as the decades passed, the story began to emerge. Jones received numerous honors for his wartime service, including a knighthood from the Queen. He was finally getting the recognition he deserved. He returned to the academic life he had left behind, becoming a distinguished professor at Aberdeen University, where he trained a new generation of scientists. Many of his students, inspired by his incredible stories of wartime innovation, went on to careers in defense research, carrying forward his legacy of scientific curiosity and rigor. Jones never sought fame. He was, to the end of his life, a modest and humble man. When interviewed in his later years, he consistently deflected credit to his team, the brilliant men and women who worked alongside him. "I was just one person," he would say. The Battle of the Beams was won by hundreds of scientists, engineers, and operators working together. They deserved the recognition, not me. But those who worked with him knew better. Jones had been the driving force. He was the one who refused to accept impossible as an answer. The one who saw patterns where others saw only chaos. The technical innovations Jones pioneered became the foundation for modern electronic warfare. The principles his team developed detecting enemy signals, analyzing their characteristics, and developing precise countermeasures are still taught in military schools all over the world today. Perhaps more importantly, Jones proved that scientific intelligence could win wars. Before Jones, intelligence was primarily about spies and covert agents, the cloak and dagger world of human sources. Jones showed that technical analysis poring over data, understanding physics, and reverse engineering enemy technology was equally, if not more, important. After the war, every major military in the world established its own scientific intelligence services, all modeled on the template of Jones's wartime organization. His legacy is not just in the past. It shapes the very nature of modern defense and intelligence to this day. His story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest battles are fought not on the front lines, but in the quiet labs and radio rooms by those who use the power of intellect to change the world. The crazy antenna that exposed Hitler's biggest secrets wasn't really crazy at all. It was the product of a brilliant, curious mind that refused to be constrained by conventional thinking. This is Reginald Jones. He understood that modern war would increasingly be fought with technology, and that winning required not just better weapons, but a better understanding of the enemy's weapons. In his autobiography, Most Secret War, written decades after the events, Jones reflected on those desperate years. "We were fighting for survival," he wrote, "and we used every tool at our disposal: mathematics, physics, engineering, and creativity." He continued, "The Germans were formidable opponents. We won not because we were inherently smarter, but because we were perhaps more agile, more willing to try unconventional approaches. But those who knew the story understood it wasn't just luck. It was one man's refusal to dismiss the impossible, one man's insistence on following the evidence." Reginald Victor Jones died in 1997 at the age of 86. Having lived to see his work declassified and recognized as one of the pivotal achievements of the Second World War. His obituaries called him one of the war's great, unsung heroes. But perhaps the greatest tribute came from a former German Luftwaffe pilot. After the war, he learned what Jones had done. "We thought our beam systems were invincible," the pilot said. "We never knew there was one British scientist who understood them better than we did, who could reach into the invisible and turn our greatest advantage into a weakness." If Germany had someone like Dr. Jones, perhaps the war would have ended differently. That may be the most profound legacy of all. Jones and his team didn't just defend Britain. They demonstrated that science, creativity, and sheer determination could overcome any threat. They proved that one person, armed with knowledge and courage, could change the course of history. The invisible war Jones fought saved a nation. The techniques he pioneered continue to protect free societies today. And the lesson he taught, that impossible simply means not yet understood, continues to inspire scientists and engineers around the world. Hitler's biggest secret wasn't the beam systems. It wasn't the rockets, or even the nuclear program. Hitler's biggest secret was that Germany's vaunted technological superiority was, in the end, an illusion. And a 28-year-old British physicist with a crazy antenna was the one who exposed it.